Aloha. Coming from our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., welcome to my show, Conversations with Kai, where every month I sit down with a national elected leader or subject matter expert to discuss issues important to Hawaii and our nation. We just celebrated Korean American Day, which marks the arrival of the first wave of Korean immigrants to the United States in 1903 and commemorates the significant contributions that Korean Americans have made across our great nation. Our Korean American community continues to grow both in size and representation within our local, state, and federal government. In fact, this Congress, we reached another milestone by electing our first Korean American women to the United States House of Representatives. And not just one, but three. Joining me today is my colleague and fellow freshman member of the 117th Congress, Congresswoman Young Kim. Congresswoman Kim represents California's 39th district, which includes parts of Los Angeles, Orange, and San Bernardino counties. She is a proud first-generation American, a small business owner, a community leader, and a mother. Congresswoman, happy belated Korean American Day. It is great to have you on our show. Thank you for joining me and the people of Hawaii. Aloha.
Thank you very much for having me and to this conversation with Kai. I really look forward to our conversation today. And may I add, in addition to being a mom, I'm a grandma now.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, if you don't mind, Congresswoman Kim, can you share with our audience just a little bit about yourself?
Sure.
Your personal experiences as an immigrant to the United States and how that experience has helped to shape the person today that represents California's 39th district.
Thank you very much. First of all, I am, as you mentioned, an immigrant from South Korea. I was a young girl when my family decided to immigrate. We first settled in the island of Guam. As you know, it's a territory of the United States. I finished my elementary school in Korea, then finished my junior high school in Guam. Wow. And then I went on to Hawaii. We call it Hawaii, and finished my high school there. And then came to California to go to USC. Wow. My journey to California and to the United States, obviously, the mainland, has taken a long route to get here. Yeah. So from one place to another, I actually was born and raised in Incheon, South Korea, and that is famous for MacArthur Landing. Yep. So anyone who remembers South Korea, it's thanks to General MacArthur, who had helped to liberate my country. Right. And I was born a few years after the Korean War. So I didn't quite experience the 3 years of Korean War, but I grew up in the aftermath. And I remember my experience and remembering Korea is when I just was walking and running after and chasing after those GI trucks, you know, when they would just pass by our streets where I lived and then just throwing out those chocolates and candies and just picking them up. Yeah. And that's my memory. And many people will remember that scene from watching the TV show, The MASH. And I was one of those girls, pretty much, right? You can imagine that. And then I went to Guam. So my journey was really, I feel also like, you know, every educational level was spent in different locations. Yeah. Yeah. My greatest memory of, you know, my young days is obviously being one in Hawaii. And then we can share some of my experiences as to what really helped me shape who I am and why I want to, you know, do what I do and serve the communities and the country that has given immigrants like me so many opportunities. But it was in Guam, actually, when my mom would always take me down to the beach with a bag of, you know, trash bag, and then telling me to pick up those cans and bottles. Wow. What I thought was just an act of cleaning up the beaches was for her to collect those and then go recycle them. Wow. And then whatever the little monies that we would gain from it, she would bring it back to church and give it as an offering. Wow. Later I found that was one of her ways, very modest ways to give back and help contribute to helping with the down payment, which later would be used to purchase our own building and build the first Korean American Presbyterian church on that island, which still today stands. That's like more than 50 years ago now, right? And then on the island of Guam, I went to Hawaii to stay and live with my older sister who was already in the United States Army.
Okay.
And because she was there, I convinced my parents to let me go. Because I thought staying on the island of Guam, I would be an island girl forever. And I just wanted to experience the bigger world. And they trusted me. I'm the youngest of 7 kids.
Wow.
But they trusted me to move ahead, experience what I wanted, and stay with my sister there, and then came to California because after I graduated from Hawaii, when my family thought I'll go to UH, I didn't. I loved Hawaii's lifestyle, but I didn't think that if I stayed there, I will never get out of the island style. So I convinced my parents, and they were still in Guam when I lived in Hawaii and finished high school. They were still in Guam when I came to California to go to college. So my memory is based on all of those, a little bit of, at the time it was a struggle for me, because as an immigrant family, we didn't have much. I just don't remember my parents providing the tuition, because I went to St. Andrew's Priory in Hawaii, and that's a private school in Queen Emma Square. I worked full-time and went to school full-time. I worked at pizza place. And oh gosh, we can talk about my experience and what happened there. But I came to California and worked full-time and went to school full-time too. So those are the things that really shaped who I am and why I am serving in public office right now, because my mom always said, whenever you have an opportunity, give back.
Sure.
That's what we can do to this country that gave us these opportunities to live the American dream.
Your mom and my dad sound
pretty much alike.
Pretty much alike.
Yes,
And for all of our Guamanian and Chamorro, families back there in the territory of Guam, we'll send them from Washington, D.C. a hafa day.
Hafa day, yes, and aloha to our
That's right.
families and friends still on those islands.
Well, Korean American Day signifies the first wave of Korean immigrants to the United States, where on the morning of January 13, 1903, the SS Gaelic steamed into Honolulu Harbor, carrying with it 102 Koreans, 56 men recruited to sugar plantations, 21 women, and 25 children. And within 2 years, the number of Korean migrants in Hawaii grew to more than 7,000 and laid the foundation for Korean Americans today. It would take over a century when in 2005, President George W. Bush established January 13th as Korean American Day, where each year we celebrate across the nation with groups like the Korean American Foundation Hawaii, our Korean American community as they continue to succeed in business, athletics, arts, literature, and government. Congresswoman, I understand that you spent a good part of your childhood in Hawaii, and you talked about that and where you went to school. I'm not sure if Korean customs are the same in California, but we know, and everyone knows, that in Hawaii, one of the most sought-after things to eat, one of the most delicious meals is kimchi and kalbi, and my personal favorite in Hawaii is this little hole-in-the-wall spot next to the Honolulu airport called Nimitz Barbecue. And my favorite thing to order is the hot chicken and the meat june, and sometimes I get the bibimbap. But tell us a little bit more about your life, whether it was growing up in Hawaii or even a favorite place that you like to get good Korean food in the 39th district in California.
Sure, yes. I love to hear that you love Korean food, but I know it also had to do with your training and living and having so many Korean friends on the island and traveling around as a pilot yourselves, right? But in Hawaii, one thing I miss is that I love noodles, so Simon obviously is one of my favorite dishes, even though we boast about having other wonderful meals. And I can tell you, Hawaii is the only place where they would sell Simon noodles in McDonald's.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't see that in California.
No, only in Hawaii.
Only in Hawaii. But in California, we boast about having the most delicious Korean barbecue places. And bibimbap, naengmyeon, galbitang, 육개장, these are all my favorites.
I'm getting hungry already.
I know. But even those Koreans who travel to California from South Korea, they tell us that the Korean dishes in California are probably the most delicious.
Wow.
And we have so many restaurants that each dish is specialized, and restaurants specialize in just one of those dishes.
Wow.
So we have restaurants specialized in noodle, we have restaurants specialized in seolleongtang, and and a big hot pot.
Wow.
The cover of a big pot would be
Like cast iron?
used, yes, cast iron. We will use that to cook on the tabletop
Wow.
for barbecues.
Yeah.
So we have so many. It would be doing disservice for me to name one restaurant, because I will be, really making somebody happy or somebody unhappy.
Yeah. Well, Congresswoman is one of the first Korean American women elected to Congress, and congratulations on that. What does Korean American Day, signify to you, especially as a Korean immigrant?
Sure. As you mentioned, 1903 is when first wave of Koreans arrived in Hawaii. Many of them felt that was their first step towards living the American dream. But they worked really hard hours, long hours at pineapple plantation. And many of them, they were young, but quickly, because of the hard toil it had on them, working long hours, almost 24 hours, they didn't have the opportunity to find their brides, many of them men, right? So what Korean American Day to me means those struggles of the early pioneers that arrived to start the Korean American community, not only in Hawaii, but throughout the United States. And there is almost 2 million of us right now. But I also remember those picture brides, those who arrived thinking that they are going to meet a very handsome young man. And they are shocked when they see who are in front of them. But it's too late. They worked it out, and they built that Korean community in Hawaii.
Businesses.
I mean, they're hard workers, as you know, and built the vibrant Korean community. Many of them then branched out to different parts of the United States. Many of them settled in California, where I'm from. And what I remember is those pioneers that paved the way for someone like me to walk the path, but along the way, build my own path for others can follow. So I remember those trailblazers like Susan Ankurdi, who is the first intelligence officer in the United States Navy. She's the daughter of our, independence movement activist, Tosan An-chang-ho. And I remember Dr. Sammy Lee, who is the two-time Olympic gold medalist in diving category, went on to become a very successful ENT doctor. I remember Colonel Young Oh Kim, whose name I'm taking after. I remember him for serving in the World War II, in the Korean War, and serving in Italy, France, and South Korea. Also leading the 110th Battalion, and also leading the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, which was all comprised of Japanese Americans. No others wanted to lead that team. Colonel Young Kim volunteered.
I didn't know that.
And his name is remembered and greatly respected by the Japanese American community to this day.
The 442nd and the 100th is
it's famously known, right?
Highly respected and honored in Hawaii. Of course, Hawaii's probably most famous senior statesman, Senator Daniel Inouye.
Inouye, yes.
Is a famous member of the 442nd. Well, Congresswoman Kim, our Korean American community has experienced great success in their journey here in America, and you talked about that. However, their story is also one of hardship and resilience. Even recently, since the beginning of the pandemic, racism and hate crimes towards Asian Americans have skyrocketed. What are some of the unique challenges that our Korean American community faces today in America? And as a prominent voice for the Korean American community and the broader Asian American community, what can be done to overcome them?
One of the first acts as an elected member in Congress was to appear before the House Judiciary Committee. I never thought my first testimony will be to talk about how Korean Americans and Asian Americans in general are not responsible for the COVID. And that no ethnic groups or ethnicity is responsible for that. And so I had to fight for our Asian community. I had to fight for giving the voice for the voiceless community at the time who were being unfairly treated with the hate crimes against the Asian community. And that was exacerbated by the comments and the statements coming from elected officials who are being very insensitive. So I talked about those things. And I work with my colleagues across the aisle, Democrats and Republicans alike, to educate them that we are hardworking community, contributing members of this great society, the fabric of America. America is great because of the contributions of these wonderful, hardworking immigrants like us. And so I use that as an opportunity to educate my colleagues to better understand who we are. The challenges we have continues. COVID continues. And once in a while, people will still nip it in the bud and say, you guys don't belong here. Go back to where you come from. Where do I go? This is my home. This is my country. So we worked on legislation to reduce those tensions and see what we can do, encourage our community who are being targeted, being, with those hate crimes to report and document better so that we can handle the situation and give the law enforcement tools to deal with it. But this is what I want to tell you and my audience, the people that are watching this program. We cannot legislate hate out of our hearts and minds because at the end of the day, it's our individual responsibility. We need to treat each other with respect and kindness and see each other as an individual contributing members.
I couldn't understand any better. As you know, there is almost no prerequisite to becoming a member of Congress. Members can come from all walks of life. It is the beauty of our Constitution and how our government is formed, and I believe it is a unique experience which diversifies our nation's voice. Can you tell me a little bit about your path to Congress, your family, what inspired you to be a public servant? I talked about how you were a very successful businesswoman in California. Why Congress, and what brought you here?
So we talked about my early days living on the island of Guam and my mother, who had great influence on me. And to this day, her words linger in my ears. And so I took the advice, and when the opportunity came, I went straight to serving in public. After graduating from college,
from USC?
From USC with a degree in business. I went on to serve as a controller at a manufacturing firm, and then went on to become my own business person in the related field. But it was when I met my former boss, Congressman Ed Royce, who was a state senator. I met with him. He gave me the opportunity and opened the door for me to enter the public service. I worked with him for 21 years in his office, and I left to run for California State Assembly. That was the first time any Asian American from Southern California representing the 65th Assembly District in California State Legislature. I wouldn't have done it without the support and the encouragement of then Congressman Ed Royce. And he said, go and do this, and we think you can do this.
How long did you serve in the Assembly?
One term, believe it or not. My run and election to the State Assembly in 2014 broke the two-thirds supermajority that the Democrat colleagues had in Sacramento. So obviously, I was a big target, and I had a target on my back for the entire 2 years that I served, but it didn't discourage me. I went on to do my part, and because I ran on being an independent voice for my district and delivered the results for my constituency, and that's what I did. But I was a target, like I said. I didn't win my 2016 re-election. But in 2018, Congressman Ed Royce would announce retirement. So I put myself together and ran for that seat. Funny thing is, I won on election night. It went on for 3 weeks. During that time, I came to Washington, D.C. to participate in freshman orientation. But I went back. They were still counting, and then the result was,
oh my goodness,
I was downwards. California had new laws that really, I believe, allowed more ballots to continue to come and count. So we won't talk about that.
Sure.
But the important thing that I want to tell you is that none of these will put me down and discourage me, because I got back up. I knew what I needed to do, and re-strategize, run again. And that's why I ran and I won again, taking out the incumbent and flipping the seats in California. So it takes courage, never letting those frustrations, because to me, success is not the failure. It's not the opposite of success. Failure is not the opposite of success, right? You just continue and fight with perseverance. And here we are.
Here you are.
So winners don't quit.
No, they don't.
Quitters don't win.
That's right. Well, congratulations. What a story. That's fantastic. You know, we both finished, or just finished, our first year. Can't believe a first year has gone by already. Our first term in Congress as freshman members. And we had to build our congressional teams from the ground up. We had to establish relationships with our colleagues in the House and Senate, and enact the agendas we promised to our constituents in 2020. Looking back, what are some of the highlights you would like to share from your first year in office?
Sure. First of all, having had the opportunity to serve as a long-time congressional staff, I had some folks that I knew that I needed to go and talk to and try to recruit them. So having built the important key executive positions, and from there I just let them do the work. I focused on building relationship with my colleagues across the aisle. And one of the first things I did was to keep my promise that I made to my constituents back home, and that is to work in a bipartisan way and bring the independent leadership they deserve. So I found the venue in the Problem Solvers Caucus. It's a bipartisan caucus with equal number of Democrats and Republicans. We come together regularly and we go through the legislation that we're sponsoring, co-sponsoring, or joint letters to support our initiatives. Through it, I was able to work and introduce and get it successfully out of the House. 12 bills out of the House. Of those, 4 are signed into law by President Biden. Very, very happy about that. I'm not going to talk about how many bills you did or introduced, but you know, I mean, I'm talking about my first year. I'm very proud of that. I also want to share some stats where, you know, because there were some 40,000 constituent letters that we responded to during that time. And over 2,000 constituents, we helped them with their specific casework and related to all different federal agencies that they are dealing with. And $2.3 million of taxpayer funds were returned to our constituents from the federal government, especially through the SBA, IRS, and VAs. Monies that they were owed to them, we were able to help get those monies back to them, $2.3 million. And $30 million I was able to work and secure through the grants program from the Department of Transportation. This will fund and try to help to finish the 5760 freeway confluence, which is the largest traffic bottleneck in the state of California, and third largest traffic bottleneck in our nation. So this project that started long before I got to Congress from my former member, Congressman Ed Royce, I'm just trying to help continue that project that is badly needed because it runs through my district, from Ports of LA, from LAX, all the way through my district, going all the way down to Chino Hills, Riverside, San Diego areas. So this project is badly needed and needed. And then just in 1 year alone, every chance I have when I get back to the district, I visit with our small businesses and listen to their concerns since we're still in the middle of the pandemic, and I serve on the Small Business Committee. So their issues and concerns were reflected as I represent them.
What a productive first year. Congratulations
it was a very
on a dozen
year
bills
for me.
passed and 4 that made it to the president's desk and signed into law. That's absolutely incredible. You know, last year for some time, you and I were both ranked the most bipartisan Republican and Democratic freshman members in Congress. You talked about problem solvers. I'm part of the For Country Caucus, which is a bipartisan group of military service members or former service members, some current, some retired, that get together regularly and talk about bills that we can work on in a bipartisan fashion. We understand the importance of getting through the gridlock of Washington and overcoming polarized politics to get the job done for our communities we serve back home. How have you been able to successfully work across the aisle to deliver those results for your constituents?
Yes.
You know, I try to meet regularly with a member from the other party, and I think that's really, really important in this nation today.
And I enjoy saying hello to you as we walk back and forth in that tunnel to go and vote, you know.
I love saying aloha
do that. I
to everyone
love
in
to
the
say
tunnel.
aloha
And
too.
they say it back, and it puts a smile on my face.
Thanks. Yeah. And so, you know, in a bipartisan way, I'm so glad that you are the Democratic member ranked as the most bipartisan member, but I'm the Republican freshman ranked the most bipartisan member by Axios, right?
Yes, sir.
I think what they were doing is looking at our voting records and the number of bills that we introduced or co-sponsored. One of the bills that I worked very closely with my Democratic colleague, Caroline Boldo from Georgia, was to introduce the Paycheck Protection Program Extension Act. That extension really allowed 2.7 million small business applicants to receive collectively $54 billion. And if we didn't do that, the 2-month period, which original PPP program ended at the end of March 31, but 2-month extension allowed that much support for small businesses. That was done because we got early on bipartisan support from our co-chairs and the ranking members and working across the aisle with my members. And I'm sure you are one of the ones who co-signed it and passed it too.
Absolutely. Well, the Lunar New Year is fast approaching, and according to the Chinese zodiac, something I looked up, 2022 is the year of the tiger. And Congresswoman and I understand another thing we share in common is we are both born in the year of the tiger.
Oh my goodness.
That's right. Before we wrap up this episode, do you have a New Year's resolution?
Yes. Well, you can see I ended 2021 with an injury. I started the new year of 2022 with COVID. So my goal this year is to stay healthy. Twice? My goodness.
Christmas and New Year's. Yeah.
So my goal is to stay healthy, get into some sort of a regular exercise routine, and don't fall. This is not fun.
Yeah. Well, mahalo, Congresswoman Kim, for taking the time to talk story with me and the people of Hawaii and your constituents of California's 39th District on so many important issues. You know, we've had a busy first year in Congress, and I really look forward to continuing our work together on behalf of the people of Hawaii and California and the United States. To end this episode, I'd like to close by wishing you a Happy New Year in Hawaiian. So, hau'oli makahikiho.
감사합니다. 저도 이 방송 보시는 분들, 특히 한인 분들께 새해 복 많이 받으시고 금년에는 원하시는 모든 일들 다 성취하는 좋은 해가 되길 바랍니다. 감사합니다. Thank you and mahalo.
If you are interested in following our offices for legislative updates, please subscribe to our e-newsletters on kahele.house.gov and youngkim.house.gov. You can also follow us on social media. I hope you'll continue to tune in for future episodes of Conversations with Kai. Mahalo and aloha.
Mahalo. Aloha.
Aloha.
Thank you for having me.